In this, the final open volume of my report, I deal with three topics: the radicalisation of Salman Abedi, the planning and preparation for the attack by Salman Abedi and Hashim Abedi, and whether the attack could have been prevented by the security service and counter-terrorism policing. While most public interest will focus on whether the attack could or should have been prevented and the role of the security service, the significance of the other two topics should not be underestimated. It is important that we understand as much as we can about the radicalisation of Salman Abedi, so that similar signs can be recognised and appropriate action taken. It is also important that we know in detail about the preparations for the attack, so that measures can be brought which would have prevented the killers acquiring the knowledge and materials they needed to carry out the attack. Radicalisation. The inquiry heard evidence from Dr. Wilkinson. His evidence detailed the differences between followers of mainstream Islam, who are the overwhelming majority and are accepting of and exist peacefully alongside people of different faiths, and those he identified as violent Islamist extremists, who believe in a narrow in-group, who believe they are the only ones with the correct world view. They are prepared to use violence against members of out-groups, which includes anyone who is not part of the in-group, including mainstream Muslims. It is important that I emphasise, as did Dr. Wilkinson, that the violent Islamist extremists are a tiny group who have adopted a distorted view of Islam based on an incorrect interpretation of the Quran. Dr. Wilkinson outlined what he believed were the various influences that had contributed to Salman Abedi's radicalisation. He concluded that by 2017, every conceivable radicalising malign presence and noxious absence existed in Salman Abedi's life. He said, "I have never seen such a complete picture of the Petri dish absolutely brimming with germs." I consider that Dr. Wilkinson's evidence was important. His perspective of the significance of behaviours exhibited by Salman Abedi was on occasions different from that of the security service and counter-terrorism policing. I would hope that his evidence will be considered with care by the relevant authorities to see what knowledge can be gained to assist in the correct identification of individuals who are at risk of being radicalised. I have concluded that there were a number of contributing factors to Salman Abedi's radicalisation. His family background and his parents' extremist views, along with their participation in the struggle in Libya, played a significant part. That struggle involved people who were radical, violent extremists. During the time Salman Abedi and Hashim Abedi spent in Libya, during which they were probably involved in fighting, they are likely to have come into contact with a number of violent extremists. It is likely that those extremists, including members of the Islamic State, who would be in a position to provide the brothers with expertise in making of bombs and in carrying out counter-surveillance measures. As leading counsel for the inquiry said during one of the hearings, how was someone of Salman Abedi's limited intelligence and abilities able to succeed in committing this atrocity despite any safeguards which were in place? The likely answer is he was provided with help. I have not been able to obtain a complete picture of the part Salman Abedi and Hashim Abedi's family played in their radicalisation, nor of what happened while they were in Libya. That is because other members of their family, namely their parents and brother, were not willing to give evidence to the inquiry. Salman and Hashim's parents were invited to provide statements but declined to do so. As they are currently out of the jurisdiction, there were no further steps that I could take. Ismail Abedi, who was in the country at the time I requested a statement, managed to leave the United Kingdom so that he didn't have to provide information which he was in a position to give. I have included in the recommendations section of Volume 3 some suggestions which I hope will make this more difficult for important witnesses in the future. Whether, if I had succeeded in getting Ismail Abedi into the witness box, he would have assisted the inquiry is very doubtful. What I was not prepared to do in the circumstances of this case was to invite the Attorney General to grant him immunity from prosecution in relation to any evidence he gave to me, in order to encourage him to speak. If he was involved in the plot, it would be quite wrong for him to have any protection from prosecution and punishment. There were other extremists, most of whom came from the same area of Manchester as Salman Abedi, and probably played a part in Salman Abedi's radicalisation and/or confirming him in his views once he had committed to violent extremism. One of those is Abdul Rauf Abdullah. A series of messages, over 1,000 in number, between Abdul Rauf Abdullah and Salman Abedi, sent during November 2014, were recovered as part of Operation Oliban, which was the counter-terrorism policing investigation which resulted in the prosecution and conviction of Abdul Rauf Abdullah for terrorist offences. Those messages talk of martyrdom. They were highly significant in the view of Dr. Wilkinson as demonstrating the influence that Abdul Rauf Abdullah had over Salman Abedi and the development of his violent extremist mindset. Salman Abedi was not identified as one of the participants in this exchange of messages until after the attack, and I have concluded on the balance of probabilities the messages were not passed to the security service by counter-terrorism policing as they should have been. My investigations, however, have demonstrated that even if Salman Abedi had been identified and the messages had been sent to the security service, it would not have affected their view of Salman Abedi. I have not criticised that view taken by the security service, but there is a learning point which could usefully be pursued, which is that the attitude of the security service to those sort of messages might be informed by the considerations which Dr. Wilkinson applied. We know that Salman Abedi visited Abdul Rauf Abdullah in prison, and also that they communicated by phone, including by use of an illegal mobile phone which Abdul Rauf Abdullah had in prison. It was apparent from the evidence that while prisons were alert to the problem of known radicalisers influencing other prisoners, they paid little, if any, attention to the risk that such prisoners, who may have had a hero status to some, would take the opportunity to radicalise visitors or encourage those who were already radicalised in their beliefs. There is no evidence that Abdul Rauf Abdullah played any part in plotting the attack, but it is likely, in my view, that he provided support for Salman Abedi's ideological beliefs and increased Salman Abedi's resolve to carry out the attack. It is important that the prison authorities do take notice of the risks that those in prison for terrorist offences, such as encouraging others to go and fight abroad, may seek to radicalise their visitors as well as other prisoners, or at least support their radical views. The government's response to the risks of radicalisation is the PREVENT programme. A review of that programme by William Shawcross has just been published and the government has responded to it. Because of that report, I did not carry out an assessment of the effectiveness of the PREVENT programme during my inquiry. It would have been beyond my terms of reference to do so. The Shawcross report does deal with issues of the Obeidis and PREVENT, and notes that neither of them were referred to PREVENT. The Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament noted the same thing with surprise. I have looked in detail at the various occasions when Salman Obeidi could have been referred to PREVENT. I have concluded that he should have been. I heard evidence that his referral was considered at one stage, but he was not considered suitable. There can be no guarantee that Salman Obeidi or Hashim Obeidi would have agreed to participate in the PREVENT programme. Their elder brother, Ismail, refused to engage in any way with counter-terrorism policing officers when they went to speak to him in 2015. I have concluded that there was at least a period during Salman Obeidi's journey to violent extremism when he should have been referred to the programme. It is very hard to say what then might have happened.